Steam Deck is already the quintessence of portable gaming, but as they say, there's always room for improvement. Today, I'll show you how to make your Steam Deck even better. This video has it all, from top-notch accessories that won't disappoint to advanced tweaks for SteamOS and setting up Windows in dual boot mode to bypass Linux limitations. This is especially relevant now that Electronic Arts has updated its anti-cheat system, cutting off Apex Legends from SteamOS, along with other titles like FIFA and Battlefield. We'll also explore how Windows performs on the Steam Deck and compare it to the default operating system. So, as always, expect not just entertainment but valuable insights. Smash that like button and let's get started. Let's start with the basics, ranked by importance, beginning with features perfect for beginners. For example, running games at 40 FPS is a fundamental tip, and here's why. 40 frames per second feels significantly smoother than 30 FPS, both in terms of visual fluidity and control responsiveness. At the same time, it doesn't strain the hardware as much as 60 FPS, which means less battery drain, a critical factor in portable gaming. However, this works best for single-player games. In multiplayer games, higher FPS is always preferable, since smoother visuals and responsiveness can give a competitive edge, especially when reaction times are crucial. Still, for single-player titles, I exclusively use 40 FPS. Another essential tip is setting up FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution. At first, I mistakenly enabled FSR both in-game and in the Steam Deck settings, wondering why it had no noticeable impact. Back then, I thought the technology was ineffective. However, here's the trick. There's no need to enable FSR in-game. Instead, lower the graphical settings and resolution in the game, and then enable FSR in the Steam Deck settings. This method noticeably boosts performance and enhances image quality. The key takeaway: only enable FSR in the Steam Deck settings, not both in the game and on the deck. These are simple but effective strategies to optimize your gaming experience on the Steam Deck. One of the most important aspects of configuring your Steam Deck is using plugins. They allow you to add many useful features or customize the desktop appearance. To install them first, you need to enable Developer Mode. Go to Settings, then System, and look for the Enable Developer Mode option. Next, switch to Desktop Mode. In Desktop Mode, open a browser and search for the DekiLoader website. If it's your first time, you'll also need to install a browser, but that's a basic step we won't focus on. To bring up the keyboard on the Steam Deck, press the X button. Once you've found the website, download the file, locate it, and run it. Then install the release version. After this, return to gaming mode, where a new section will appear at the bottom of your settings. This is the Install DekiLoader, through which you can download plugins. At the time of recording this video, there are 61 plugins available. However, we'll only cover the most useful ones, in my opinion. The first plugin is CSS Loader, which allows you to customize the console's interface design. For example, if you want to replicate my setup or create your own style, simply click Install. After installation, go to the list of themes by selecting the plugin and clicking the download icon at the top. Here, you'll find a wide selection, but not everything is a theme. Some options change button designs, others modify the in-game download menu, and a few even customize the startup screen. For convenience, you can use filters to narrow down your choices and create a unique desktop design. To change a game's icon, background, or other related visuals, use the SteamGrid DB plugin. This plugin has its own library of images for almost all popular games. To swap an image, hover over the game, click the button with 3 lines in the top right corner, and scroll to the section for changing the image. Here, you can choose a cover, wide cover for CSS Loader themes, banner, logo, or icon, allowing for even more customization of your Steam Deck. The next useful plugin is ProtonDB, which shows game compatibility with SteamOS, or in simpler terms, with the Steam Deck. You might wonder why it's necessary, given that the Steam Deck already has default categories for playable, unsupported, and unknown games. The key advantage of ProtonDB is that its ratings are based on real user feedback, offering a much broader perspective. For instance, take The Witcher 3. While Steam lists it as fully compatible, ProtonDB gives it a platinum rating instead of gold. By clicking on the rating, you can see why. Recent user reviews often mention frequent crashes, and you'll also find recommended settings to play without issues. This makes the plugin quite valuable for ensuring smooth gameplay. Speaking of settings, there used to be a plugin called Deck Settings. It provided preset configurations for specific games to achieve optimal performance. Unfortunately, it disappeared after a recent SteamOS update. Hopefully, it will return soon, as it was incredibly convenient. There's also a thing called Tunnel Deck, which adds a VPN for the entire device. I think you can guess how and why it can be used. The good thing is that it works without additional setup. Lastly, on my list is the Fantastic plugin, which allows you to customize the fan, for example, making it activate earlier to prevent throttling. Of course, there are many other useful plugins, from power tools for overclocking and processor adjustments to EmuDeck. which includes almost all retro emulators for old-school gaming fans. In short, you can explore further and see what else is available, but I want to talk about something that even plugins can't do: bypassing the limitations of SteamOS, as some games simply don't work on it. And, of course, I'm talking about installing Windows. You might wonder why, especially when devices like the Legion Go or ROG Ally come with Windows pre-installed. But Windows also has its drawbacks. For instance, it's not the most gaming-optimized system. It always runs background processes, which can cause stutters. Plus, the interface isn't the most user-friendly, among other issues. That's why I still play most games on SteamOS and only use Windows to bypass the limitations of SteamOS. This raises another question. For example, why not just install SteamOS on a Legion Go and enjoy it? And yes, you can do that, but the problem is that Valve, despite its promises, still hasn't officially released SteamOS. They seem to be developing a version for the ROG Ally, but it hasn't been released yet. In contrast, drivers for Windows are readily available. Valve's website has a dedicated page with drivers for all essential components, like the card reader, Wi-Fi, and video drivers, to ensure everything works smoothly. So after installation, there's no need to fuss with configurations. Just download, install, and enjoy. As for installing Windows on the LCD version, I have no idea. People say it's easier than on the OLED version, and I'm inclined to believe it. My own experience with installing Windows was a serious challenge, mostly due to technical issues and updates from Microsoft. Still, there's nothing inherently difficult about it, at least if you've ever installed Windows on a PC before. To begin, you need to split the internal drive into two sections. According to online videos, a special program called Gparted is needed for this, but it didn't work for me. Later, I found out it was due to an update, so I had to download an older version. However, I chose a different path, which also exists. I installed Recovery SteamOS on a USB drive available on the official Steam website, booted from the USB, and split the drive into two sections using KDE Partition Manager, which works similarly to Gparted. After that, it's just a standard Windows installation. But I must be lucky because everything went wrong for me. Specifically, Windows itself installed fine, but it blocked the SteamOS bootloader. After reading online, I discovered I wasn't the only one, and it seemed this is a common issue with the new version of Windows 11, while older versions work fine. However, my SteamOS, where my games were installed, remained intact, so I didn't want to format the drive and start over. Thankfully, I found a video on the same internet that explained how to unlock the drive with SteamOS. I had to install Recovery on the USB again, go into the console, type in numerous commands, and yes, it worked. The SteamOS bootloader appeared in the BIOS. It sounds simple now, but it took a lot of time, so when Steam Deck Clover Dual Boot, a boot screen for selecting the system, didn't install initially and then games wouldn't install on Windows, probably due to some disk errors, I just lost it, wiped everything to zero and reinstalled, but this time I chose Windows 10 instead of 11. And believe it or not, there were no problems during the process. So, if I'd installed Windows 10 from the start, all of this could have been avoided. So if you plan to install Windows, keep that in mind. But it was definitely worth it. Now I can download games from the Epic Games Store during free giveaways, enjoy Game Pass, which is especially relevant with the release of the new Call of Duty Black Ops 6, the main reason I did all this. As a bonus, I can also download Battlefield, which is included in EA Play, also available with a Game Pass subscription, along with hundreds of other interesting games. And everything works not much worse than Valve's OS. However, it's all very situational. Specifically, it depends on where the game is installed. For example, when Apex was installed on a USB drive, it took a long time to load textures and clearly lowered the frame rate. On the other hand, when playing from a memory card on SteamOS, these issues didn't exist. However, if the game is installed on the internal drive, there are no problems at all. It plays just like on the original operating system, so I install single-player games on the memory card where there's time for textures to load, and multiplayer games like Black Ops 6 on the internal drive. For instance, Starfield, which runs at around 30 FPS like on the base operating system, looks a bit blurrier. But it's important to note that I couldn't figure out how to enable FSR as Windows doesn't have a handy side menu with settings. All you get is a small utility where you can adjust TDP, gamepad emulation, fan speed, and a few other minor things. But overall, it's not a big deal. Games run pretty much the same. It all comes down to game optimization in the end. Here's the deal. The main advantage of Windows, or rather dual booting, is that you eliminate the limitations of SteamOS and can play all the games that aren't available on the base operating system. Plus, you gain access to other stores, third-party programs, and more. The downside, however, is that using Windows isn't as convenient as SteamOS, as I've mentioned before. Additionally, during the first 5-10 minutes of gameplay, you might experience some micro-stuttering, which eventually goes away. I call this Windows switching to gaming mode. where it either loads everything necessary for the game or shuts down unnecessary processes to avoid interference. It's something to keep in mind. It's normal, but SteamOS doesn't have this issue. That's why I prefer playing most games on SteamOS, switching to Windows only for Call of Duty, Battlefield, Apex, and similar games, or to take advantage of free content from Game Pass and the Epic Games Store. This wasn't the most detailed comparison, but I didn't aim to compare the two operating systems in this video. My goal was to show how you can upgrade your Steam Deck. If you'd like a full comparison, let me know in the comments. Now let's move on to the third point that will help you improve your portable device: accessories. For example, the paddles on the Steam Deck don't work quite the same as those on a standard game controller. Instead of pulling them towards you, you press them inward. I hope that explanation makes sense. I'm not the best at explaining. Here's how it looks on a regular game controller, and here's how it works on the Steam Deck. If this feels awkward or you don't want to get used to a new mechanism, there are special paddle attachments that redistribute pressure, allowing you to press them in the familiar way. Another essential accessory is a memory card, especially for those with the 64 GB version. I recommend getting a card with a high read speed, at least 100 MB per s, to ensure there are no issues with loading or launching games. If you're not afraid to open up the console, you can even upgrade to an NVMe M2 drive. It costs slightly more than a memory card, but works faster due to its direct connection. And the best part? You don't void your warranty because there are no seals on the back cover. Big respect to Gabe Newell for that. You can customize just about anything on the back of the Steam Deck. There are special back covers with RGB lighting, because how can a gaming device not have lighting? That's just unacceptable. Although these covers need to be charged separately, some people don't mind. Alternatively, you can opt for a back panel without lighting but with extra ventilation holes. Surprisingly, these actually reduce the CPU temperature by a couple of degrees. Why Valve doesn't include such panels by default is beyond me. If you know why, let me know in the comments. The last thing I'd recommend is a dock station for connecting your portable device to a stationary monitor. This might not be essential for everyone, but it's a great alternative to consoles. You can play on a big TV or sitting at a desk, connect a keyboard and mouse to dominate in shooters. There are so many ways to use it, since the Steam Deck is essentially a portable PC, meaning you can configure and upgrade it however you like. That's all for today. Thanks for watching until the end. All the links for your convenience are in the description. See you soon in new or maybe old videos on the channel.